Oh, God. It's a real high school bully type of joking. He says, could you not find a GIF that said that? Maybe you should tell your radio audience of 103 people, 70% of which are probably bots, all about it. Go take some pictures, fancy boy. And this was him replying to someone else. I said, Sean, it's 2 a.m. I thought you were going to bed. Because he had already said several times at this point that he was embarrassed for me and was going to let me off easy. He said, that's what your dad tried to talk me into. He wants, quotes, the business again. And I said, is that what you call your ass? Which is really on Sean's level, but
yeah.
He said, no, I call my ass the body snatcher. Because he was making fun of a video I have on my YouTube of me hitting a body snatcher punching bag. And he said, and it still stinks less than the video you posted under the same name. And I said, you call your ass the body snatcher?
Oh, Jesus. Oh.
And then he said, dude, you lost badly. You know it and I know it. You tried to get cute and you got straight roasted to a crisp. In the timeless words of Khabib, you have to give up. So I quote tweeted and said, a man has to know when to admit defeat. In the timeless words of one of my personal fighting heroes, I submit. Now please stop choking me, Mr. Moorcraft. So, I don't know. I had a good time. He was so mad. He was killing me. He got me with some good ones, man. It was all the most savage, like, personal takedowns he could muster. Boy, oh boy. All right. You might be able to tell from my laughter that I'm kind of sick.
Sick from being burned so hard.
Because I'm burnt to a crisp.
Yeah.
Sean, why? Ugh. I don't know why I decided to do that. Sometimes I'm just online, and I'm feeling extremely online, and I see someone, I'm just going to fight with this person. Petty, silly, but a lot of fun. Isn't that what social media is for, Phil?
It is, apparently, yes.
For random exorcism of your personal demons by attacking people you disagree with?
Yeah, just for general petty...
Mm-hmm.
Turning anything into the most... Any given discussion into the most petty, like, small-minded thing possible. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what it's about.
For example, do you call your ass the business? Yeah. I
mean, yeah, this basically, it's a tremendous example, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Of, this is someone, like, asking questions about corporate responsibility in modern America, which ends up with a man describing his own ass as the body snatcher and thinking that is a good insult. Like, that's what Twitter does to discourse.
I love it, man. Hello. Welcome to the latest episode of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. The Viscount, the Reverend, I can't remember what we settled on, but he's got a cool title and he's a cool guy, okay? Welcome to the show. We are here. I'm excited, as you can tell. I'm tripping over my own words because we saw in quick succession last Saturday the two best fights of the year so far. I don't know if there's any arguing against that. It's quite possible there's recency and I'm forgetting a big one, but at UFC 236, we saw a mostly meaningless undercard, which for the most part felt mostly meaningless, but we knew the top two fights were extremely compelling matchups. They were Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway 2 for a meaningless interim title, and Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelums for an equally meaningless interim title in the middleweight division. But both of these were very compelling matchups. Everyone cares about watching Israel Adesanya push forward as a mixed martial artist. Everyone cares about Max Holloway. Dustin Poirier is an exciting, thrilling, violent fighter who has now beaten in a row Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, and Max Holloway. And holy shit, these two fights were absurd. To the point that they were almost upsetting. They were brutal, they were dramatic, they were basically everything you could possibly look for in a great fight. Phil, do you want to share in my enthusiasm? How did you feel about them?
Yeah, I mean, they were amazing. I mean, the main event in particular, like you said, I kind of shared the sense of it was an awesome fight, and I mean that in both ways. I mean, it engendered a sense of how amazing it was, but also just a kind of sense of almost dislocation and horror of what was happening. You know, it was one of those ones where it was hard to dissociate from the fact that these are not just, you know, these are two guys who are taking each other to fucking pieces.
Yeah.
And that they are great guys who have fought for everything they've like, who fought to make it to this position. They're two of the most likable, hard-working fighters in the sport. It was in some ways difficult to watch, and it was, you know, great and terrible,
but impossible to look away. And and unlike the last fight that you described in those terms, Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez, this fight also had a tremendous amount of technique on display. It was every bit as brutal, but also extremely tactical. It was insane. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about Izzy Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, which, in my opinion, was the best fight of the night, only because I'm such a Max Holloway mark, and I like both Max and Dustin so much that I found the brutality of that fight to be just the tiniest bit off-putting. I didn't have as much fun rewatching it, though I was certainly on the edge of my seat live. Whereas Adesanya Gastelum, you know, like, it was awesome. Incredible momentum swings. I really, really enjoyed that fight. We're going to talk about those two after that. At the end, the very, very end of this episode, we are going to talk to you about only one fight from next week's card in St. Petersburg, Russia. And boy, have they stacked it with a whole lot of names that end in the letter V. The main event, Alistair Overeem, Alexei Oleinik. That's the one we're going to talk about. And boy, I can't wait. But before then, let's dive in on Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. We've said it was a brutal fight. Paint me a broad strokes picture of the dynamic in this matchup. I mean, well, actually, here's how I kind of want to talk about it first. How do you feel about your prediction or your view of this style matchup beforehand? Because I have some thoughts about it's changed my thoughts about how I view both of these fighters in relation to one another.
I feel like the main things which I think we got the broad brush strokes of the matchup right, in that, you know, how these guys want to approach, what they're good at, you know, what their potential flaws might be. I feel like the main flaws were, the main area in which we were incorrect was in the defense of these guys. Because Max Holloway, I think, is probably is a more defensively vulnerable fighter than we've given him credit for. Like, particularly if he's made to move backwards. And conversely, Dustin Poirier is really a much better defensive fighter than he has been in the past. I mean, we sort of mentioned in last week's episode that it's kind of crazy how one of Dustin Poirier's big problems in the past was that he would just default to a big, high forearm guard and just hide behind it until the other guy got tired of hitting him, or in some cases didn't get tired of hitting him. And Poirier has really become one of the best active guard users in the sport, if not the best active guard user in the sport. It's crazy to think that this was his, you know, this giant flaw that he had. And now he's just fighting someone like Max Holloway and able to pick off like multi-punch combinations with his elbows and, you know, respond to multiple different attacks whilst still keeping his eyes on his opponent and still, figuring out a point to slide out of the way or counter.
Holloway outlanded him in 3 of the 5 rounds, but not by typical Holloway margins, not even close. And overall, Poirier, and again, it's important to remember, this is Max Holloway he's fighting, the volume guy, the guy who landed 300 strikes or something against Brian Ortega. He kept Holloway from landing any more than 3 more significant strikes than him in the entire fight. They were like within a 3-strike margin of one another on connect rate, which is insane. For the most part, all that Holloway was getting in with were the body shots. I agree. Poirier's defense looked really, really tight and solid. An active guard is the operative word here, because he kept his eyes on Holloway as he was coming in. He would adjust his guard and sort of turn his body a little bit to catch different parts of a combination. And it fell apart at a certain point. He was not able to predict the kinds of combinations Max Holloway throws, but that's a notably clever and overwhelming combination fighter. And as I said, the body, which is always the hardest thing to defend consistently, was really the only area where Poirier was regularly taking shots. He deflected and blocked or avoided a lot of Holloway's shots upstairs. And the same cannot be said for Holloway with Poirier's head punches, because Poirier threw at a significantly lower clip, but landed at almost exactly the same rate. Or landed almost exactly the same number, and therefore actually had a significantly higher accuracy, I think. So, yeah, that was wild. Poirier's defense, I did not expect it to be that much of a factor. I think, much as we may malign him, our hated colleague, Zane Simon, he raised a good, I think, he had a good perspective of the dynamic in this matchup last week when he and I were previewing this fight. He basically was like, well, there's a battle between moving forward and moving backward. And what it ended up being, as so many style matchups do, was a contest between who could move forward. Because Poirier, as the fight went on, was in trouble whenever Max was pressing forward, and Max was in trouble for the entire fight, literally any time Poirier came forward to throw punches. And the dynamic that Zane identified was that Holloway's defense is better coming forward, better when he can basically initiate and pressure and time your responses. And it did look that way, certainly not very early, but that's Max Holloway. As the fight went on, he was doing a better and better job of not getting countered as he came forward. But that his defense he's particularly vulnerable when he's retreating. He doesn't really move his head. He tends to get really high in his stance and just sort of bounds away. It's his famous footwork. I think he's just not used to having to use it at that range because most people can't reach him. And then the other side of that coin was that Dustin Poirier is more vulnerable coming forward when he's leading, but has subtly become a pretty capable defender off the back foot and a pretty good counterpuncher off the back foot, and tends to suck a lot of people into exchanges like that and then nail them with big shots. And the matchup didn't play out exactly like that. Again, that dynamic transmuted into a fight between two guys who both knew they needed to come forward to win the exchanges. But I think that dynamic explains why it turned into that kind of fight. If you consider what I think is the most important element in this matchup, Poirier's power. I knew Poirier was a big hitter, but frankly, watching this was a lot like my experience watching Jędrzejczyk Shevchenko, where I see the fighter come up, this fighter who's been struggling to make weight, come up to the next weight class, and they fight someone who, and I'm not trying to disparage Dustin or even Valentina here, but they fight someone who is cutting a significant amount of weight to make that weight class. So in essence, they are still fighting someone who is a full weight class larger than them, and the strength and power advantage is huge. And I think Poirier to make 155 these days, and this does kind of sadden me, Phil, that Poirier was once like the success story of not having to cut, and now that he's getting older, I think he cuts 25 pounds to make 155. So, he's the same situation he was in at featherweight, and maybe someday he'll be a welterweight. But that weight did seem to be a factor, coupled with the fact that Poirier is just a naturally heavy-handed fighter as well. But holy shit. It was like every shot Poirier landed clean hurt Max Holloway. And so it intensified that dynamic where Holloway was in serious trouble almost every time he retreated and allowed Poirier to walk him backwards. And coming forwards, he was having more success, but all Poirier needed to do was time one good counter in order to put Max back on the back foot and take the momentum back for himself. So like that power was a huge factor in how these exchanges played out, because without that, I think you can very easily see this turning into a fight where Holloway overwhelms Poirier, who was definitely getting tired. Like he was definitely slipping away from him, but he stayed composed. He stayed defensively tight as best he could, and he looked to land the power shots when he was given a chance. And it worked beautifully. Like, yeah. Any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great call from that son of a bitch, Zane Simon. That he definitely nailed like where these guys were at their best defensively, and I think it was similar to something that we've a dynamic we kind of called out in the old for the old Weidman Rockhold and Weidman Jacare fights. Mm-hmm. In a fight between two people who want to come forward, the question isn't necessarily push the other guy backwards more, because Holloway is the more durable, higher paced fighter, but it also comes down to who can survive going backwards more. And when Poirier was pushed back, and he was pushed back earlier than Holloway was in this fight. Mm-hmm. He was pushed back into the cage. He picked the shots off his elbows. He blocked most of them, and he would try and either back Max off, or he would just reset. When Holloway was pushed backwards, he was actually in trouble a lot of the time, and so yeah, a lot of these dynamics came down to the fact that Holloway is a capable counterpuncher, but this is generally in exchanges. And I think Poirier had keyed in fairly early into the fact that he just couldn't let Holloway get rolling in exchanges. So Holloway will come out with his dabbing jab. This is the thing that starts everything for him. It allows him to, start setting up all these creative angles, where he'll mix up his entries and then start building out into things where you're trying to guess what timing and what range and what angle he's coming in at. And Poirier would just try and hit him every time that jab came at him. He didn't care whether it was committed or dabbing or
Hold on,
anything
I'm sorry,
like that.
Phil,
He would
I just played some fight sound while you were talking. Please repeat what you said.
So he didn't care about what was coming behind Holloway's jab. He would just be there to fuck it up with either a right hook or a left hand, and he would always follow that with more punches to ensure that Holloway was going backwards. Because we've seen, as I think Zane called out, we've seen Holloway multiple be backed up by combination punching, included by Aldo. Mm-hmm. But what Poirier could do, and this to me was the more surprising thing in some ways than the power, because we knew Poirier is a tremendous hitter.
Yeah, of course.
What shocked me was his cardio. Mm. I mean, how did he throw with that much power and that consistently? That first round is one of the most insane paces I have seen in this sport from anyone. That extended flurry that he put on Holloway. I mean, it's like Aldo did that to Holloway, but then he stopped because he rightly understood that would completely drain him. Poirier did that and then just continued it for minutes on end. Mm-hmm. Just full power, hooks and straights and bludgeoning Holloway up against the cage. I mean, this is the thing, I don't think anyone else could have done that.
Yeah, in retrospect, I didn't say this beforehand, and this is the thought that was really made me think, man, I did not get this style matchup as well as I would have liked to. In retrospect, is Dustin Poirier maybe the worst matchup in this division for Max Holloway? Incredible stamina and recovery, longer reach, huge power, and extremely technical boxing. people were saying, watching this, because the weight did seem to be such a factor, and Poirier just having so much more power, people were saying like, oh, well, should Max go back down to featherweight? And I'm inclined to say no. Like, featherweight's a really, really difficult cut for him, and it's bad for him. And it's likely that being at lightweight will allow him to grow into the division a little bit, which he's going to do anyway as he gets older. But I'm thinking, I watch this matchup now, and it doesn't really change the way that I view a potential matchup between, say, Max Holloway and Kevin Lee. Max Holloway and Khabib. Like, this doesn't have any impact on how I would view those matchups. Without the power and the capabilities of using it for 5 rounds. Like, who else can do that? It was an incredibly impressive performance from Dustin Poirier. I really want to underscore that. Like, he fought a fantastic fight. Seemed to be in tremendous shape. The skill set looked amazing. Do we talk about the scoring at all, Phil?
I guess we can. It was one of those. It was a fight with 2 clear rounds and 3 fairly close ones. There's probably an argument for a Holloway win. I'm not against it. Like, I think that the first round is pretty much a 10-8.
10-8
for Poirier.
Yeah, I agree.
And the third round is a fairly clean Holloway round, and everything else is fairly close. I think Holloway gets fucked up a bit too badly at the end of round 2 for me to really be able to give him that round.
If that had been round 3 Holloway, but it was just at the start of the Holloway ramping up after surviving round 1. So, like, he didn't do quite enough damage before Poirier, under boxing rules, knocked him down, dropped him back into the fence, and then staggered him 2 or 3 more times at the end of that round. So,
yeah, it's one where I feel like the acceptable scores are basically from 49-46 Poirier to 48-47 Holloway, and just like Poirier just beat him up more. Like, even in fights where I felt that there's a scoring only criteria, there's a scoring only argument for one guy winning. Like, I think we both sort of agreed that there's a real strong argument for Gustafsson beating Cormier.
Sure.
Gustafsson, he just didn't really win that fight. At the end of it, he was done a bit. He was. You could just show that to anyone. You could be who didn't know about MMA scoring, and they'd be like, "Yeah, this guy pretty much won."
Yeah.
And in this fight, it was like Poirier just beat the shit out of Holloway way too much, like too many times.
Yep.
And it too much of it felt like Holloway just being insanely tough just incredibly game and coming really, really close to battling his way back into it.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. I think I'm a little more on the side of it definitely being a Poirier win for me. Which maybe is colored by, like, I'm always of 2 minds when I think about fights and how they're scored. Like you just laid out, I'm always thinking about the scoring according to the criteria, which I enjoy. And there are so many people out there who love to score fights and literally don't know the scoring criteria for MMA judging. So I feel like it's good to have a grasp of that and understand how to score a fight. Or at least, I don't know, have your own idea of how to score a fight that pertains to your interpretation of the rules. But I'm also always thinking, like, I don't know, just really broadly, Max Holloway landed only 3 more strikes and clearly got hurt far worse on far more occasions. So, like, it doesn't feel like a Max Holloway win. You know what I'm saying? It does not feel like he won that fight. It feels like he lost it. And I agree with your assessment of round 2. I think rounds 3, 4, and 5 are all fairly close. But, like, for me, I would probably say a 10-8 in the first round and Poirier winning round 2 pretty clearly for me. Makes it that, like, the best I could see is a Max Holloway draw. Which I think he would have fucking earned a draw, He really, really fought his ass off trying to get back into this. But one thing I do want to point out before we move on, a very specific technical thing, but I did write an article not too long ago about Jorge Masvidal's knockout of Darren Till And much of the premise of that article hinged on the notion that right hooks are, in fact, the trickiest thing for an orthodox fighter to see coming, vice versa, that southpaws have trouble seeing the orthodox fighter's left hook coming. Boy, could Max Holloway not see Dustin Poirier's right hand for, I don't know, the first 50% of this matchup. That was the punch he had so much trouble with. And yeah, I want to credit Poirier again, like for being such a subtle and intelligent combination puncher now. It's so different from the guy who was only throwing hooks, the kind that you could not help but see coming back in the day. And now here he is, like, sliding just out of range as Holloway's trying to exchange with him and just clocking him across the chin with a right hook as he fades away. Beautiful. And my cat appreciates it as well.
Good job, Cat. Glad to hear you're a Poirier fan too. But yeah, I mean, we can't say enough about how much better Dustin Poirier has gotten, and how improbable that kind of thing is, especially in the line of the fact that he's had multiple struggles in his way up through 2 divisions, and there's that he's become from a guy who used to be someone who would clearly, visibly panic under pressure. He's now fought literally perhaps the two most terrifying pressure fighters in the sport.
For different reasons. Whose pressure is more withering than Justin Gaethje's and Max Holloway's? Like, that is incredible to have a guy like Poirier absolutely would have been smoked by those two style matchups as they are now just a few years ago.
And the thing is that you can see that he's not just some insane. He hasn't become just some insane, unfeeling, psychopath who just can't conceive of the fact of losing. He's clearly, Dustin Poirier is still in there, the same guy. He's just learned how to control it. He's got all these little, you can see all his little in-fight rituals where he'll get into trouble, and like I said last time, he takes a breath, he'll bob his head to one side, and then he'll spit on the floor, and he'll get back to it. It's just like, yep, no, we're back here again.
The spitting, that's his tick for, like, all right, it's a fight.
He's got like a few of them, he kind of, but it's all just like this armor, and Holloway got him into, like, he turned him into old Poirier at points. He got him just shelling up against the fence, and Poirier just got back out of it and went back to work.
Mm-hmm. And Dustin is still in there, as evinced by my favorite moment perhaps in this fight, when Dustin Poirier got tagged with a jab and then spat sort of in Max's direction a little too much, and the referee was like, don't spit at him, Dustin. And then Poirier was like explaining to Max, like, I wasn't trying to spit on you. And Max was like, yeah, I got it, I know. It's cool. And then,
just the moments between them were great as well.
Yeah.
Just the general respect, the stare down and fist bump at the end of, I think it was the second.
Mm-hmm.
Like, amazing.
Yeah, there were some incredible moments. Like, again, it's not super fun for me to rewatch, or even the first time. It was thrilling. It wasn't all that fun. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I love Max Holloway, but overall it did feel like, in counter to Adesanya Gastelum, which we'll talk about in just a moment, it felt like Max's typical performance being denied. His typical building approach being denied, rather than any, like, strong momentum swings. It was like Max would start to swing the momentum, and then something terrible would happen to him, and it would be like, oh shit, he's not going to be able to do it. So, but incredibly respectful, both guys. Like, how do you not like both Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier? I just want to see Max take a long break after this. Please take like a year off. All right, anything else to say, or should we move on?
Nope. Don't think I've got anything else to say about it. It was incredible. I don't ever want to see. I've had too many now, 3 fights where they've been Max Holloway fights, and I haven't been able to really look forward to them at all because they've just filled me with an intense sense of grief.
The 2 Aldo fights in this one?
Yeah, in that they are both Aldo fights and this one, and I would like him to not fight any more fighters that I really love, thanks.
Yeah, or any fighters who might make me regret loving him, because I have transmitted much of my Jose Aldo love to Max Holloway, and now he's getting beaten up. God damn it. This isn't why I made this switch. So yeah, It was something. But let's take a break. When we come back, Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum and more from UFC 236. And after that, the one you're all waiting for, Alistair Overeem versus Alexei Oleinik. How much do you want to bet, Phil, that Alistair will at some point feel Oleinik tap? Because it seems pretty likely to me.
Yeah, he will feel it.
Overeem by guillotine after this.
Yep.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are talking about the co-main event of UFC 236, Israel Adesanya, the style bender, against Kelvin Gastelum. Oh, God. This shit falling down in the background. It's all going wrong. What do you say in the UK, Phil? It's all going tits up? It's all going pear-shaped?
Yeah, either one of those.
Okay,
Don't
great.
mix them, though.
Okay, great. Don't tell me what to do, you absolute melt. I've been learning cool slang. What's happening?
Cool.
Adesanya Gastelum. Phil, the first thing I want to ask you, did this matchup change anything about your perception of Kelvin Gastelum? Because now everyone knows, having listened to last week's episode, you hate him with a burning passion.
Yes, it did. I thought this was a career best performance from Kelvin Gastelum.
I would agree.
I don't feel like my view of him has not transformed. I still think he's that dude, but I think this was his most crafty and kind of functional and encouraging performance like we've ever seen from him, as well as being just incredibly gutsy. He's always incredibly gutsy.
God, he's so tough, dude.
Yeah.
We got the fact that we saw both, the fact that Max Holloway never officially got knocked down by all the shit Dustin Poirier hit him with, and that Kelvin Gastelum survived all of the brutally clean shots that Israel Adesanya landed on his chin. Like, holy shit, especially that fifth round. Like, this man is Carlos Condit durable, no doubt. Yeah, what struck you as crafty about his performance? Like, because I agree. I thought that Gastelum, it wasn't very consistent because it's Kelvin Gastelum, but he did show some new wrinkles at various points in this fight. A couple things that I thought, gave Adesanya a lot of significant trouble. What did you see?
Like quite a few things, and like you said, they came in real fits and starts. In that there was, I think that he said afterwards that he learned a lot from this fight, and I'm honestly really hoping that's true, because you saw at various points in the fight, we saw pieces of what could be a real scary pressure fighter down the line. Yeah. So to start with, it was very much kind of classic Kelvin Gastelum, hop back and forth, spearing jab, trying to line up the left hand. I thought his defense in open space, I think we talked about his defense as being bad last time, and that is sort of still true, but he's one of these guys where his defense when he's not doing anything is fine. You can't just walk up to him and hit him as you can with some fighters. But his defense once he starts throwing is notably weaker. But in this case, we saw he actually managed to integrate head movement and slips into a lot of his entries a lot more than he has in the past. So he was able to actually get in on Adesanya. And he was, and whilst his defense didn't look, wasn't amazing, that was a huge improvement. He showed much more willingness to use cage cutting strikes and body work, which he should be using as a really short person. We saw much more of him closing down with a wide hook to get into Adesanya and get his hands on him. Let me think. I think from the early going, those were the main kind of improvements. It still was, it was still pretty much those were the ones that we saw earlier on. There was some stuff that popped up later, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, as far as it went at the beginning, Oh, and feinting his way inside was also a nice thing to see from him. He's always, feinted a bit, but it was much more convincing and effective this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that early knockdown he hit Adesanya with was, it was like, again, like it's all kind of messy. Like, this is the thing is like Gastelum is just rife with potential to be a great fighter because he's so tough, he's powerful, he's extremely quick. He seems really physically strong for his size relative to a lot of his opponents. Maybe that doesn't apply here because Adesanya, I don't even think really cuts weight to make this weight classes limit. But like Gastelum has so much potential just physically as a fighter, and he's proven that. As we said, like the number of top middleweights that he has beaten or strongly competed with, just based on like his baseline abilities, his attributes, is pretty astounding. But yeah, like instantly we saw in this fight, like shortly into the first round, he came forward, he feinted his way in, he rolled his head under as he came forward. He did that sort of like, I don't know what the term for this type of footwork is. It's kind of a shift, but when you do like you roll, you get low in your stance, and then you just sort of step out of your stance to sort of just waddle forward. He did that to close the distance. Nice move. And then he came at Adesanya with a sweeping left hand that pushed Adesanya to his right, and then a right hook was the finishing shot rather than just the throwaway setup for the left hand. The right hook cut Adesanya off going back and caught him in a really compromised position. And so like Gastelum, with the addition of those moves, even if I don't think his footwork really looked any better, with the addition of those moves, he was able to test how good Adesanya really is off the back foot. And we saw in the Anderson Silva fight and a couple of others that Adesanya would much rather be the ring general. He'd much rather be coming forward and leading the dance than fighting off the back foot and countering. He can do it. He's a smart fighter who sees lots of what's happening and very creatively comes up with solutions. And he did in this fight as it went on. But he is somewhat vulnerable, if he's vulnerable to anything on the feet, to pressure. And Gastelum was able to just find more creative and interesting ways of getting in, and then more creative and interesting ways of capitalizing when he did get in. So, Adesanya had a lot of genuine trouble dealing with those forward bursts of Gastelum.
I also think that Gastelum was able to, I don't know if this was planned or if this was instinctive, he was able to capitalize on one of Adesanya's tendencies, which you mentioned in one of your earlier breakdowns of him, which is that Adesanya tends to leave his hands on his opponents when he throws at them. Mm-hmm. And so like in that first knockdown, you can see Adesanya leaves, I believe it's his right hand extended, and Gastelum basically grabs it and then uses it and kind of pushes it around and uses it to club Adesanya over the top. Adesanya is always a very, it's one of the reasons why I think he has instinctively why he has such a good striking, why he's made such a good transition to MMA, is that he likes to have his hands on people. Mm-hmm. He likes to, he's an instinctively strong clinch fighter. He is a natural grappler in at least one sense. Yeah. But it also means that against short guys, his tendency to just reach out and post and grab and, feel where they are, it means that they can feel where he is as well, that he's not putting his hands up to guard himself as much as he might necessarily be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, like putting your hand out just blindly posting doesn't tend to work quite as well as head control, as like getting your hand firmly on the side of someone's head and controlling their posture. But Gastelum took care of that in the sequence you're talking about. Yeah, he stripped Adesanya's hand off of his head and came under it to land that right hook. So yeah, an interesting exploit again of some of Adesanya's tendencies that do leave him defensively vulnerable. I think like there's always the temptation to compare Adesanya to Anderson Silva, but Adesanya is much more offensively insistent and potent, I think, than Anderson. He's probably not as powerful, but as an offensive fighter, like that's where you really see his footwork and his incredibly diverse striking shine. But defensively, I don't think he's nearly as good as Anderson was at his best.
I think it's perhaps a little more nuanced than. I mean, I think that he's someone who is willing to fight in spaces where perhaps Anderson was less willing to. Because when we talked about it last time, we mentioned that Kelvin has struggled with fairly unsubtle lateral movement, in that people have just circled away from him have been reasonably troubling for him. Adesanya didn't really do that a whole bunch. He a lot of the time he was playing very kind of high percentage games with not high percentage, just playing much more low percentage games with Gastelum, in that he was confident that he could move inside the pocket with Gastelum. He could, or just outside of it, he could respond and defend and respond, whilst risking that he would be hit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Silva was ever really took those kind of risks. I mean,
there's definitely an element of that. The things I talk about with defense, though, are like Adesanya is much less likely to roll under a punch. This is a problem that Max Holloway has too. And I get it. In MMA, there are more things to worry about. You have to worry about head kicks and knees, in addition to just the uppercuts and hooks that boxers have to worry about. But there are a lot of times you see this in MMA where someone's getting chased down, and they either this is the most frequent, they either don't feel comfortable planting their feet and closing the distance on their own to protect themselves. They don't feel comfortable smothering the aggression. But B, they don't feel comfortable changing levels to defend themselves. And that's important because, there are a lot of shots that a simple duck will protect you from when someone is chasing you swinging hooks. And Adesanya didn't, even after the trouble in the first round, he doesn't really do a lot of that. He does it when he's sort of like Holloway, when he's pressuring and sticking someone on the end of his punches. But when he's retreating, the defense is a lot less varied, shall we say. He's certainly not comfortable doing what Anderson used to do and just standing there and letting you throw and miss for a while,
Yep.
So as for the fight itself, I enjoyed it more than Holloway Poirier a great deal, I think. It had huge momentum swings. Adesanya took over in a huge way after losing the first round. Very convincingly won the second. After that point, due to the body work, the disgusting leg kicks he kept landing, was just tearing Gastelum down. And Gastelum still came up with some new tricks to get himself back into the fight. Do we want to talk about that head kick in the fourth round?
Yeah. I will say that it was real interesting when the second round, I think it was either the second or the third round, came around, and Gastelum started sort of bouncing around a bit, and Rogan was saying, he's using this line on his feet style. I like this a lot more from him. And he just got shit kicked in that round. That's just no, you're not going to win an outside kickboxing match with this much more experienced kickboxer with a 9-inch reach advantage on you.
Yeah.
He just got smoked. But
increasingly, as the fight went on, any time it was at distance and he was not actively pressing forward, he was getting chewed up.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about the head kick knockdown is that Gastelum started using his own leg kicks before then. He was this is one of the strange things about Gastelum, is that he's not really he's never turned into much of a prototypical Cordero fighter.
Yeah.
That you would expect, as a pressure fighter, you expect a few things. You expect, apart from anything else, the rear body kick and leg kicks to kind of break people down and to catch them when they retreat, to encourage them to exchange. But not only did he start throwing more combination punches, but he started attacking the legs of Adesanya a lot more. And he'd been relatively monotone in his approach up until that point, because he's Kelvin Gastelum, and Adesanya was just clearly not prepared for it at all. I mean, Gastelum had himself clearly prepared head kick defense over and over again. I don't think Adesanya barely hit him, tried going to his head multiple times, and Gastelum got his head up almost every time, but Adesanya had gotten into the flow of just slipping sideways out of Kelvin's kicks, and maybe when he saw Kelvin loading his hips, he thought that a leg kick was coming, and he was wrong.
Mm-hmm. A fighter like Gastelum with lots of power and speed can really, really take advantage of those simple switch-ups. Like a very parallel to his body shots. Made his left hand effective. In the first round, he actually threw a couple of left straights to the body. And then by the second round, I had forgotten about those, and I was like asking on Twitter, like, has Gastelum attempted any left hand to the body? And basically right when I said it, he started throwing them again. And he started landing his left hand upstairs as a result. And yeah, same with the leg kicks. Like, you're fighting Adesanya, he has to respect whatever you throw with authority. So yeah, I like that Gastelum was just like variety alone would be a huge addition to his game. Just being willing to mix things up and play strikes off of one another. A huge problem for him coming into this matchup was he just 1-2s people. Like, how is Adesanya not going to figure that out? And as he was doing that, like in several moments of this fight, like a whole 10-minute stretch between rounds 2 and 3, that's kind of what he was doing. Was just winging big 1-2s and doing that little leap in hop step move into range. And like once Adesanya got comfortable with that, he was just picking him apart. He had no trouble seeing those big telegraph strikes coming. And the moment Gastelum tried to mix things up again, he started to land and hurt Adesanya. So like, I like you hope that that's the kind of stuff he means when he says he learned a lot in this matchup. I would love to see more of that from Kelvin Gastelum. Cause he's really good in the very limited way in which he can be good.
Yeah, I mean, this was broadly a kickboxing match against, like we said, a far more experienced striker with far more diverse striker, a much more defensively sound striker who was, who really landed an awful lot of shots on him. I mean, unfortunately, by the 5th round, I think Gastelum was pretty much dead on his feet. He was still trying for it, but also Adesanya, either smartly or courageously realized that Gastelum cannot fight really backing up at all.
Yep.
And that whilst Gastelum is perfectly happy to exchange in the pocket, by this point he was both too damaged and too focused in on chasing down Adesanya to do that. So Adesanya would crack him with a right hand, and Gastelum would be ready to chase him, and Adesanya would just stand in front of him and hit him with a left hook.
Yeah.
He was just like, no, why don't I just try punching you in the head over and over again?
Yeah.
I mean, I think at some point one of the commentators, I think it was Rogan, said Kelvin has one of the best chins I've ever seen. And Cormier said, then that's because he's so good at slipping, he's taking taking power off the shots. And I was like, he's not really doing that. He's mostly just Adesanya is doing that. He is not doing that.
He is mostly eating them.
Yeah.
He's just eating them whole.
By the end of the fight, it was amazing that he pretty much survived that, but I also would have been happy to see it stopped. Just because, it was the best Kelvin we've seen. I don't really want to see him broken by it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I also thought that Mark Goddard kind of dropped the ball with the end of this fight. The last basically 30 to 40 seconds, Kelvin Gastelum was out on his feet. He had neither the energy nor the awareness to protect himself or fight back with any kind. He was trying to throw punches. All the speed was gone. He had no notion of accuracy. He was just on instinct, just reacting. And meanwhile, Adesanya was hitting him with terrible clean shots, horrible, brutal clean shots. I would have, the moment at which Gastelum had already been knocked down and got back up, and then he got knocked down again, and there was a 2 or 3 second window, at least it felt that way live, was Adesanya was rocketing towards him, coming down with a skull-crushing elbow. I'm like, I normally like your work, Mark Goddard, but that seems like a pretty good opportunity to stop this fight. I don't see what Kelvin is going to possibly gain from fighting through another 20 seconds of this. But yes, the last thing I want to say is I always like watching Adesanya's footwork, even if it is marginally better in an aggressive context. But that's what I really liked is there was definitely some of him standing in front of Gastelum and knowing he could exchange with him. But there were also a lot of instances in this fight of him nailing Gastelum with a right hand and then stepping off to the side. Like, as Gastelum thought Adesanya was going to sting him and then leap back out of range, Gastelum would sort of lurch forward like he was ready to chase, and Adesanya would have already pivoted or sidestepped to his side and would just ding him with another perfectly clean right hand from the angle. He did that over and over and over again. Just crack, sidestep, crack. And by the end of the fight, there was such an accumulation of damage. Yeah, again, I would have happily seen it stopped.
Yeah, I think Kelvin's entries in the end just became too. He basically learned, like, on defense, Kelvin is going to slip left. On offense, Kelvin's going to come in behind the right jab and then step off to his right in order to line up the left, and then he would just pivot out to the side of it and just start cracking Kelvin along the side, the side of his body. And I mean, yeah, it was tremendously courageous performance from both guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the, I'd probably still put it behind. I'd still put it behind Romero Whittaker too, but other than that, and probably the second best middleweight fight we've ever seen.
Yeah, that seems fair. It was incredible. One more thing. What about Israel Adesanya's grappling? The brief glimpse of it we got to see. I don't want to, I'm not giving myself credit for this because it's such a vague feeling, but coming in here, we had seen little glimpses here and there of Adesanya dealing with problems on the ground, and he'd always responded, at least since he came to the UFC, basically, or since that Rob Wilkinson fight. He has always responded in really intelligent, schooled fashion. It looks like a trained grappler. And I was like, remember when Robert Whittaker fought Uriah Hall, and then in round 2 or 3, he spent 2 minutes grappling with him on the ground, and he got him in an arm bar and swept him and ended up on top and passed his guard, and it was holy shit, Robert Whittaker's good at jiu-jitsu. That was the thing that happened here. Adesanya, with no hesitation, went for and very nearly got a high elbow guillotine on Kelvin Gastelum, got swept, and I was like, oh, that's it. The fight's over. And he locked up a triangle. And then, this being Israel Adesanya, putting his grappling game to the use it should be put to, he used that triangle as Gastelum was escaping it to sweep and escape and get back to his feet to continue beating Gastelum up. So, that's cool. I like seeing Adesanya actually being good at the ground game.
Yeah. Yeah, it was awesome. If I never would have expected of the two that Adesanya would be the one who would threaten with two legitimate, dangerous looking submission attempts over the course, flash submission attempts over the course of this fight. Mm-hmm. That's Kelvin's thing.
It's just been very useful for Max Holloway. That guillotine threat that he's developed has been coming really handy. Even against Poirier, came in handy a couple times. So yeah, it's cool to see a skilled striker like Adesanya, not just keeping that as an afterthought, not just thinking of that aspect of the game as a thing that should be avoided, but what are the wrinkles in this phase of fighting that work for my game? It's great. So, awesome. Fantastic fight. I loved it. It was awesome. Very clearly, for me, the best fight of the year so far. A lot of other people will say the main event, and that is totally fair because they were both unbelievable fights. Let's take another break, and when we come back, we'll look at one or two other fights from this card. As I said, it was basically a 2-fight card, which isn't to say there wasn't some good action on the other portions of it, but it was kind of spread out and there wasn't a lot of name value. And then, as promised, and I promise we are getting into it, folks, as fast as we can, we are making our way towards Overeem versus Oleinik after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about, well, which other fights from this UFC 236 undercard did we want to hit? I think there were really just two. And the first among them I mean, I guess we should, since we're not really going to discuss it, we should say Nikita Krylov submitting Ovince St. Preux, not the brand of funny I was really banking on and hoping for, but still pretty funny. So that's good. Very light heavyweight.
I am looking forward to breaking down the technical masterpiece, which will inevitably be Nikita Krylov against Johnny Walker.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Actually, I'm kind of enjoying the light heavyweight division these days. Speaking of something that is not extremely light heavyweight, though, let's talk about a fighter getting better. Khalil Roundtree fought Eric Anders, and my pick for this fight, we didn't discuss it on this show, but my reasoning for my pick was extremely simple. It was, I'm going to pick Eric Anders because this is a slow fight, a matchup between two guys who like to keep a low pace, and one of them is just incredibly tough, and the other one isn't. So I picked Eric Anders. And instead, Khalil Roundtree, who throughout his entire career up to this point has had such a strong pattern. Like, this is a puncher's path dude to a T, where he throws everything he can into every single shot early. Huge energy expenditure. And this is for a guy who is extremely muscular and athletically gifted. Throws huge power, exhausts himself, falls apart. That has happened so many times. I had given up on any notion that it could ever be any different for Khalil Roundtree. And yet, he came in here against Eric Anders and put on what was by far the best performance of his career. What did you think?
This was also funny, but in a different way. Because
you're a cruel man.
Because we were mentioning this before the show, and again, I think this is an insight I've stolen from that son of a bitch, Zane Simon, in his post-fight show, is that there are so many times when MMA fighters go off and learn like specific stuff from a specialist, where you're like, this guy's been training with Olympic boxers, and he comes in and just starts winging 1-2s and gets obliterated.
So-and-so has Rafael Lovato in their camp. And then they come in and they, it's like Melvin Goddard or whatever, and he still gets rear naked choked immediately.
Just gets insta-subbed. Like, it happens all the time. Like, Jake Shields went and trained for some significant amount of time in Thailand and came out looking like Jake Shields with a moderately better body kick. Like, this is simply how things work. This is why this fight was hilarious, because Khalil Roundtree went to train in Thailand and came back looking like he had been training in Thailand. Like, fighting out of a kickboxer's stance. He was looking like fucking Sagat in there. Like,
gigantic jack dude bouncing on the toes of his lead foot, throwing almost exclusively low kicks. Like, that was a very Muay Thai performance from Khalil Roundtree. He absorbed, I don't know if he was there for like 8 weeks, and he absorbed so much in that time. It almost makes you wonder, like, what was he learning before? Because he picked it up so well.
Right. Can he be this guy for everything?
That would be awesome. Yeah. Let's talk about the performance itself, because it is, as I said, and I don't think you disagree with this, the best performance of Khalil Roundtree's career. But under what did, at the time and especially in retrospect, feel like kind of forgiving circumstances, because as I said before, like, this was going to be a slow-paced fight. That expectation was based on the fact that Eric Anders, even more so than Khalil Roundtree, who was only ever slow-paced sort of by necessity, because he gets so tired from throwing the way he normally does. Eric Anders is characterized by slowness, by doing very, very little. And that is especially true, as we saw in his fight with Lyoto Machida, when he faces any fighter with any modicum of footwork, of evasive movement in their game. So, frankly, for as good as Khalil did, it did look to me like Anders was just pathologically incapable of answering any of the problems he was having. So I still want to see these new tools of Khalil Roundtree's tested against someone who will try to smother him against the fence or pressure him with strikes or counter, when he's landing those shots. Like, holy shit, if Anders had just started throwing straight left hands down the middle when he was eating all of those inside low kicks, that may have changed this fight dramatically. So I still don't know. But given the matchup he was given, Roundtree looked great.
Yep. Not only did he have a ranged weapon which just didn't exist before, and one which looked amazing. Yeah. I mean, those low kicks were both incredibly fast and incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But
for a lead leg with no switch inside low kicks.
Yep. He was counterpunching combinations. He was, his footwork looked better. He got pretty tired and sort of turned a bit more into Khalil Roundtree as the fight went on. And Anders decided once his leg had been turned into chowder that he might as well come forward, and actually started doing a good deal better in the third round and frankly, as the commentary team were, I would have been very happy to see them stop it before that round. But
because he got savaged in the first round and then knocked down, 3-4 times in the second?
It was at least, it was 4 times, I think.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And got nothing done in either of those 2 rounds offensively. Nothing.
Yep.
Yeah, so. Yeah, Roundtree got tired, but I don't know. I am hoping, Roundtree seems like a nice guy. He's got his, inferiority issues, sort of in a similar way that, Uriah Hall does. But he seems like a nice, pleasant man. And he's exciting, whether he's on or off. So, I would like to see Khalil Roundtree, with all of this athletic ability, all this power, have a sort of Dustin Poirier thing, where it's he can get into trouble. Because he did get tired, and Anders was pressing, but even so, he didn't let it get to him. Now, some of that probably has to do with the fact that he had utterly dominated the fight up to that point. Had gotten a 10-7 and a 10-8 before that. But, he kind of kept it together. He got tired. He had to retreat a little bit, but he sort of reined himself in. And I thought, stayed to the course, as it were, impressively. So good shit from Khalil Roundtree. I enjoyed that. It was actually very brutal, but I enjoyed seeing him improving. A guy that I had definitely given up all hope of ever seeing him change.
Yeah, when we weren't expecting to see anything good from either one of them, so it was a genuine, pleasant surprise to see good things from one of them.
Right.
It was also a truly appalling performance from Anders, and I want to see him keep going and go to heavyweight, because he's still really slow at light heavyweight. He doesn't learn very good, as it appears, but he's double tough, and that all just sings heavyweight to me.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. Dealing with more reach, what's he gonna do? He doesn't have any range tools.
He'll actually be faster than heavyweights.
Yeah, but he doesn't close the distance. He doesn't have any range tools.
He'll be faster than them. He'll be able to.
It'll be fine. Hopefully by the time he gets to heavyweight, Thiago Santos will be there as well. That'd be great.
Thiago Santos just chasing all the people he's fucked up through their division.
Yes. Soon he'll have his rematch with Anthony Smith, and once Anthony's dead, he'll get to kill Eric Anders at heavyweight. So that'll be great. Okay, the one other one we wanted to talk about, and fairly briefly, but this is one that we previewed last week. Our boy, Bilal, remember the name, Muhammad, fought Curtis Millender on the Fight Pass prelims. And the prophecy has come true. Kevin Holland has now beaten and lost to, respectively, Jeff Neal and Curtis Millender, and Bilal Muhammad, remember the name, has now lost to and beaten, respectively, those same 2 men, which is mind-boggling to me. I don't know. I don't know how Kevin Holland could have beaten the guy who did to Bilal Muhammad what Jeff Neal did to Bilal Muhammad, remember the name, in his last fight. But this fight for me really underscored how good Jeff Neal is and or has become, because all the difficulty he had with the incredibly precise, quick, efficient, smooth boxing of Jeff Neal, here against a fighter with equal power and longer reach, he was having a much better time of timing things, countering, getting inside, landing shots to the body and the head, and closing to get to that clinch range that he so desperately wanted but could never really hold on to against Neal. It was a classic sort of Bilal Muhammad performance.
Yep. And I believe one of us picked against him last week.
It certainly wasn't me.
Yeah, it was me.
Did you
Sorry,
really?
I wanted to make it sound for a moment like I made the right pick there, but no.
Did you really? I don't remember this. Yeah. How did I not excoriate you to pieces for that?
Because that would be wrong.
How could you pick against Belal Muhammad? You like him a lot.
It was a sadness hedge.
Oh, that's right. Okay. That's right. That's why I wasn't mad. I was like, okay, I get it. Because you do really like this guy. Were you pleased with his performance then?
Yeah, it was great. He's it was real classic Belal Muhammad, remember the name Muhammad performance. It was also I think he's one of these guys who definitely likes fighting orthodox fighters a lot more than he likes fighting southpaws.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to just occupy a lot of Melender's vision with the jab, and then kind of use that to set up his big leaping hook and right hand, and eventually to start. He did a really nice job of just lining Melender up into clean takedowns.
Yeah.
And he just kept an incredibly consistent pace, as he is, he has a tendency to. And he's one of these guys that, he's unlikely to finish people unless he lands the shot of his life, but he is literally always going to be trying his ass off in every way to win fights. Yep. And it was awesome. I enjoyed it a lot.
Trying his ass off to finish people, too. Despite how difficult a time he has doing that at this level, he's always trying to end the fight in his favor. You and I both really respect Muhammad is like a real, I don't know, he's like a fighter's fighter. He's like a journeyman's journeyman. He's just he does a lot with not a great deal of natural ability. I'm not saying he's certainly not the least athletic dude in the world. He's certainly capable of fighting at this level, but we both really appreciate his ability to game plan for opponents. And again, unfortunately for Belal, a lot of this just sort of underscores in my mind how impressed I am with Jeff Neal, because Jeff Neal proved to be an opponent who, in part because of the southpaw thing, but also just because of the way his game works as he has refined and developed it, is just really difficult to game plan against. He's going to use his reach. He's going to keep his feet moving. He's going to stay relaxed so he can keep volume on you, but he's got huge power when he needs it. And he used all of those things in concert to make it really, really difficult for someone to pressure him and close the distance and do what Muhammad did here to Melender. But against someone like Melender, who's definitely a lot closer to the likes of Randy Brown than Jeff Neal when it comes to game plan ability, if it's relatively straightforward to come up with a strategy to beat them, Muhammad is going to adapt his game to beat them. And I like watching him do it. So, good shit, Belal. I will not forget your name. Never. Okay. Overeem Oleinik, Phil. We finally arrived at our destination. I know after all of those incredible fights, we're really, really excited to talk about this. I don't know.
Alistair Overeem is going to horribly fuck Alexei Oleinik up.
But what if Oleinik submits?
I know. It will be. This is the thing. I have to say, I like new Alistair Overeem a lot. Because he is clearly one of these guys who was something of an asshole. And I don't really think he is anymore. I think he's a guy who's come out of the other side. He's been kind of beaten and battered so much that he's just achieved a kind of zen state where he's accepted it all. He went to that, to that higher plane of existence after Francis Ngannou punched him.
Overeem is proof in concept that a good old fashioned ass kicking really does work, but sometimes you need 19 of them over the course of a 20-year career.
Yeah, and I've just genuinely enjoyed him because he's just probably the most three-dimensionally skilled heavyweight fighter, but he's also so fragile that watching him trying to make his way through heavyweight is like watching someone trying to speed run a really shitty video game without getting hit.
Yeah.
It's like the environment you're in is terrible, but there's something weirdly fascinating about watching you trying to get through the heavyweight equivalent of Sonic Boom or some other terrible knockoff version of something of an actual genuine IP. He's just it's just there's a certain fascination. It's how good does how much does a serious wealth of technical ability in almost every area balance against the fact that this division is filled with super tough people and you're not very tough.
I remember back in my college days, my dorm buddies and I used to play the EA MMA game before EA started doing the UFC game. So it was all like Strikeforce and Affliction guys. It was the one that had Fedor in it, which was the major selling point. They had like Fedor and Randy Couture on the cover, and that was like a big scandal at the time that Couture betrayed Dana White by agreeing to be on this non-UFC property. And we used to play our own special game in that where you would have it be a single 20-minute round, Pride rules, and one of you would play Bob Sapp. And the other person could be anyone. And if you were Bob Sapp, you would win by making it to the end of the 20-minute round. If you could survive as Bob Sapp, you won. Because his stats reflected his actual fighting ability. He was very fragile, very slow, got tired really easily. I remember that. And that's sort of like Overeem is sort of doing that, but taking it really seriously. Like if you're playing that mini game, but with really big stakes, that's Overeem. Speaking of really big steaks, horse steaks, delicious. Was that a good, timely joke?
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
But
the matchup.
So the main thing that we've seen from Overeem is that his speed is going.
Yeah.
But he's still, like, if he's fighting someone who he's still much faster than, he's still pretty much going to wreck them. I think this was most apparent in the Curtis Blades fight where he just couldn't literally get his hips back fast enough to sprawl on takedowns anymore.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh yeah, you actually genuinely are, like, kind of reaching the end of the line here. But also, for example, against, Mark Hunt, for example, we saw that if he can just be insulated by his speed enough to just leverage a far more effective, like to just leverage multiple parts of his game, if he can fight from the outside and survive in the clinch and go for takedowns or whatever, he's still just a way better fighter than most heavyweights.
Yeah, it's true.
And there's no, like, he might have slowed down significantly. There's no way he's as slow as Alexei Oleinik.
No, that's true, but remember that Ben Rothwell fight? I think there's a significant...
Ben Rothwell's pretty fast.
Is he?
Yeah. I think
he's not
weirdly fast.
He's not as slow as Oleinik.
Quick.
That's
he's a weirdly quick dude.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'm going to have to look into this and do some research before I agree with you. But even so, like, there is a chance here, in my mind, that Oleinik just has to pressure like crazy. Like, I thought the same thing about Mark Hunt, like he's really losing his speed and, he doesn't have like the size of Overeem to insulate him somewhat, nor does he have the foot speed, the agility of Overeem that allows him to get out of range. But Oleinik just put a lot of pressure on Hunt, and it turned out to be exactly the right thing. It wasn't a difficult game plan to come up with, but it was just powerful and came forward and through, and he's always been a powerful hitter and effective when he can get to the pocket. So I don't know. I do think there's a significant chance here, honestly, that Oleinik just comes swinging forward and Overeem gets clocked.
Yeah.
Because that's the joy of watching Overeem. There's always a significant chance of that happening. But I am very confident that if it goes to the ground, Alistair Overeem will not get Ezekiel choked. I have confidence that he is...
Oh, why did you make that pick?
I have confidence that he is smart enough not to get Ezekiel choked, right? He's actually a good grappler. He fucks people up on the ground when he gets on top of them. I think he could do that to Oleinik.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to say. He could actually fuck Oleinik up from top position as Daniel Omielanchuk did.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean... I'm increasingly worried about making picks for heavyweights to do smart things. Because that was the root of why I picked Overeem to beat Ngannou back in the day, because I was just like, I've never seen anything from Ngannou to indicate that he can lead. So if Overeem just stays on his bike, as he's increasingly done in recent fights, then he'll win. And similarly, like the JDS Lewis thing, it was just like, if JDS just fights exactly the same way as he normally does, he'll destroy Lewis, and then JDS starts the fight and just with lunging right hands. I'm very loath to now say that, like, all this heavyweight has to do is not walk into the incredibly obvious trap with a giant glowing neon sign of "this is a trap" above it.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, now that I've said it, I really do hope it happens.
Yeah.
But, that being said, like, I do think it's somewhat different for Overeem on the ground versus on the feet, like where everything's fluid and he's just panicking and freaking out, and he knows in his heart of hearts that anything could hit him at any moment and he won't see it coming. Whereas on the ground, like, he's still a really big, strong, physical freak who, from half guard, will just destroy people with elbows and hammer fists. So, I mean, I think he can not get Ezekiel'd. But if he does, someone please clip this and paste it everywhere online. All right. I think that does it for our episode. Oleinik, Overeem ahead of us, but really 236 was where it was at. That's why we spent all of today's episode talking about it. But I hope all you guys enjoyed those fights as much as we were, or at least were as enthralled as we were for those bouts. Before we wrap up, Phil, have you got anything coming out this week?
I've been so bad at doing this lately. But no, I don't have anything specifically coming out. Everything I try and write sort of goes into the back burner, so most of these things that I've mentioned that I would write are still there in some way, shape, or form. But so mostly just the preview of that incredibly enticing Overeem Oleinik fight that I'll be doing with David.
Can't wait for that. Yeah, I'm in the same situation. Listeners of this show will know that many times I say I will probably have something coming out the next week. It does not get completed and then goes on to the back burner as well. A lot of drafts on my Google Docs. But this week I will be, having said that, I will be doing a Gastelum Adesanya article. I want to talk about that fight. I want to give it the sort of the treatment I used to give 5-round fights. I haven't written one in a while, but the pivotal moments, breakdowns I did where I'd be like, here's the key moment from this round, how it changed the momentum of the fight, why it was important, why it worked. So that'll probably come out in 2 parts. So expect at least the first 2 or 3 rounds of Gastelum Adesanya to be broken down in an article by me this week. And you can find that article, if you're looking for it, on bloodyelbow.com. Same for Phil's previews and all of his other articles. You can find a lot of stuff there at bloodyelbow.com, but mostly stuff written by us. Don't look at the other stuff. Let's see. Find us on social media with your comments, your questions, your concerns. Twitter.com is usually the best place for that. Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson, and my handle is at BoxingBush, B-U-S-C-H. Check out our Patreon. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Give us an iTunes rating and review. Do all that stuff that I haven't asked you to do in years now. And thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. We will be coming back at you next week to, let's see, not just recap Overeem Oleinik, but also to look forward to what is now Jacare versus Hermanson. Oh, and the fucking Greg Hardy's on this card. All right, that's next week. Thanks, everybody. We love it. It's a great sport. It's very real and legitimate. It's not embarrassing that it's my job. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.